"Get out, sir! You're not welcome here!" The words sliced through the air like a grenade, exploding in Marcus Jackson's chest. A black Marine with 20 years of service, Marcus stood ramrod straight in his dress blues, the crisp uniform gleaming under the auditorium lights. His chest sparkled with medals, each one a story of courage, sacrifice, and survival in places like Fallujah and Kandahar. Today was supposed to be a celebration, the day his son Jaden graduated high school with honors. Marcus had dreamed of this moment for years, picturing himself in the crowd, beaming as Jaden crossed the stage. But now, 2 security guards blocked his path, their faces twisted with a mix of authority and contempt. The taller one, a burly man with a buzz cut, jabbed a finger toward the exit. "You need to leave. Now." The auditorium, packed with families buzzing with excitement, fell into a stunned hush. Parents clutching programs and students adjusting their caps turned to stare. Whispers snaked through the crowd. "What's going on? Why him? Is he in trouble?" Marcus felt the weight of every gaze, each one a pinprick against his pride. His heart pounded, but he kept his face calm, his voice steady. "I'm here for my son's graduation," he said, locking eyes with the guard. "I have every right to be here." The second guard, shorter but equally defiant, stepped closer, his hand resting on a radio clipped to his belt. "We've got orders." "You don't belong here," he sneered, his tone dripping with accusation. Marcus's mind raced. Orders? From who? He'd arrived early, found his seat in the 3rd row, and even chatted with a few parents about Jaden's college plans. There'd been no trouble, no reason for this. Yet here he was, singled out, humiliated in front of hundreds. He glanced toward the stage, where Jaden sat in his black cap and gown, his eyes wide with shock. Jaden's hands gripped the edge of his seat, his face a mix of confusion and anger. Marcus wanted to reassure him, to tell him everything would be okay. But the guard's presence was a wall between them. The taller one took another step, his voice louder now. "Don't make this harder than it needs to be. Leave, or we'll escort you out." The crowd's murmurs grew louder. Some, voices tinged with outrage, others with curiosity. A woman in a floral dress whispered to her husband, "This isn't right." A teenage girl near the front pulled out her phone, discreetly recording. Marcus felt the heat of injustice rising in his chest, but he'd faced worse. Enemy fire, ambushes, the weight of command in life-or-death moments. He wasn't about to back down. "I'm not going anywhere," he said, his voice low but firm, carrying the weight of a man who'd stared down chaos and won. The guards exchanged a glance, their confidence wavering for a split second. They hadn't expected resistance, not from a man whose posture and scars told a story of battles fought and survived. The tension was suffocating, the air thick with anticipation. Marcus stood his ground, his eyes never leaving the guards. He thought of Jaden, of all the nights he'd spent deployed, missing his son's soccer games and school plays. This was their moment, a milestone earned through years of sacrifice. No one was going to take it away, but the guards weren't backing down either. The shorter one muttered into his radio, calling for backup, while the taller one widened his stance, as if bracing for a fight. The crowd was on edge, some parents standing to get a better view, others shielding their kids' eyes. It felt like the room was holding its breath, waiting for the spark that would ignite the powder keg. Then, from the back of the auditorium, came a sound, chairs scraping, footsteps echoing. 6 figures rose from their seats, their movements synchronized, deliberate. They were men, tall and broad-shouldered, dressed in sharp civilian clothes that couldn't hide their military bearing. Their faces were hard, their eyes locked on the scene unfolding at the front. The crowd's attention shifted, a ripple of curiosity spreading. Who were they? Why were they standing? The guards noticed too, their heads turning, uncertainty flickering across their faces. Marcus didn't see them yet, his focus still on the men trying to tear his moment apart. But he felt a shift, a subtle change in the room's energy, like the calm before a storm breaks. The 6 men began to move, their steps measured, cutting through the crowd with purpose. Parents parted to let them pass, sensing something extraordinary was about to happen. The lead figure, a man with a shaved head and a jaw like granite, reached the aisle closest to Marcus. His presence was a force, commanding attention without a word. The guards froze, their bravado shrinking under the weight of those 6 pairs of eyes. The crowd was silent now, every breath held, every phone raised to capture what came next. Marcus finally turned, catching sight of the men approaching. Recognition flashed in his eyes, a spark of hope amid the chaos. These weren't strangers. They were brothers, forged in the fire of combat, men who'd stood by him when the world was falling apart. And now, they were here, ready to silence the room. Marcus Jackson had built his life on sacrifice, each decision rooted in love for his son, Jaden. 20 years in the Marines meant missing moments most fathers take for granted. Jaden's first words, his wobbly attempts at riding a bike, the school plays where he shined as the lead. Deployments to Iraq and Afghanistan had kept Marcus away, often for months at a time, with only grainy video calls and handwritten letters to bridge the gap. He'd lie awake in dusty barracks, clutching photos of Jaden, promising himself he'd make it home to be the father his son deserved. Every medal pinned to his chest, every scar etched into his skin was a testament to his commitment, not just to his country, but to giving Jaden a future free from the struggles Marcus had known growing up. Jaden was his pride, his reason for pushing through the chaos of war. At 18, Jaden had become everything Marcus hoped for: a straight-A student, a varsity soccer captain, and a kind-hearted young man who'd earned a full scholarship to a top university. Marcus remembered the day Jaden got the acceptance letter, his son's face lighting up as he shouted, "Dad, we did it!" Marcus had hugged him tightly, feeling the weight of every missed bedtime story melt away. This graduation was their shared victory, a milestone that symbolized not just Jaden's achievements, but Marcus's unwavering dedication. The night before, Marcus had spent hours polishing his dress blues, each brushstroke a ritual of pride. He'd imagined Jaden spotting him in the crowd, that wide grin breaking across his face as he crossed the stage. Marcus wanted his son to see him not just as a father, but as a Marine who'd fought for their family's dreams. Now, standing in the auditorium, that vision was under siege. The guards' accusations, vague, baseless, cut deeper than any wound he'd taken in combat. Marcus's mind flashed to the nights he'd spent in Fallujah, dodging sniper fire to pull wounded men to safety. He'd faced fear then, but this was different. This wasn't a battlefield. It was his son's graduation, a sacred moment, and these men were trying to strip it away. His fists clenched at his sides, not out of anger but from the sheer effort to stay composed. He could feel Jaden's eyes on him from the stage, those dark eyes filled with a mix of shock, anger, and something worse, embarrassment. Marcus's heart ached at the thought of his son feeling ashamed, not of himself, but of the father who'd always been his hero. He glanced at Jaden, seated among his classmates in a sea of black caps and gowns. Jaden's hands gripped the edge of his chair, his posture rigid, as if he wanted to leap down and stand by his father. Marcus gave him a small nod, a silent promise. "I've got this, son." He refused to let this moment define them. He'd taught Jaden to stand tall, to face adversity with strength, and now he had to live that lesson. "I'm not leaving," Marcus said again, his voice a low rumble, carrying the weight of a man who'd stared down death and walked away. The guards shifted, their confidence faltering. The taller one muttered something about orders, but Marcus wasn't listening. His focus was on Jaden, on the promise he'd made to be there for this day, no matter what. The crowd's whispers grew louder, a mix of confusion and outrage. A mother in a red dress leaned forward, her brow furrowed, as she whispered to her neighbor, "This isn't right. He's a veteran." A group of students near the front exchanged glances, one pulling out a phone to record the scene. Marcus felt the weight of their stares, not just as judgment, but as a call to hold his ground. He'd faced prejudice before, sly, comments in training, skeptical looks in civilian life, but never like this, not in a moment so personal, so public. The auditorium felt like a pressure cooker, the air thick with anticipation. Parents shifted in their seats, some craning their necks to see better, others clutching their programs as if bracing for what came next. Marcus's thoughts drifted to his own father, a factory worker who'd taught him to carry himself with dignity, no matter the odds. "They'll try to break you, son," he'd said. "Don't let 'em." Those words had carried Marcus through boot camp, through war, and now through this moment. He straightened his shoulders, the medals on his chest catching the light. He wasn't just fighting for himself, he was fighting for Jaden, for every promise he'd kept, for every letter he'd written from a war zone promising he'd be home. This was their day, and no one, not these guards, not their mysterious orders, would take it away. But the guards weren't backing down. The shorter one spoke into his radio again, his voice clipped, calling for backup. The taller one widened his stance, as if preparing to physically remove Marcus. The crowd's murmurs turned to gasps, the tension spiking. Marcus kept his eyes on them, his training kicking in. Assess, adapt, overcome. He could handle this. He had to. For Jaden, for their family, for every sacrifice that had led to this moment. Then, from the back of the room, came the sound of chairs scraping, footsteps echoing. 6 figures stood, their presence like a thunderclap. Marcus didn't see them yet, his focus locked on the guards, but he felt the shift, the way the room's energy tilted. The crowd turned, eyes wide, as the 6 men began to move, their steps deliberate, cutting through the sea of spectators like sharks through water. Something was about to change, and Marcus sensed it, a lifeline in the storm. The 6 men moved through the auditorium like a force of nature, their presence parting the crowd like a wave. They weren't just any men. They were Navy SEALs, brothers in arms who'd fought alongside Marcus in the crucible of war. Dressed in sharp civilian clothes, tailored jackets, polished shoes, their military bearing was unmistakable. Broad shoulders, steady gaits, and eyes that missed nothing marked them as men who'd faced death and walked away stronger. The auditorium, already taut with tension, seemed to hold its breath as they approached. The guards, who moments ago had been brimming with bravado, faltered. The taller one's hand dropped from his radio, his posture shrinking. The shorter one took a half-step back, his eyes darting between the advancing men and Marcus, who stood unwavering in his dress blues. The leader of the group, a towering man named Ryan, reached the front first. His shaved head gleamed under the lights, and his jaw was set like stone. He stopped a few feet from the guards, his presence a wall of authority. The crowd leaned forward, phones raised, capturing every moment. Ryan's voice cut through the silence, deep and commanding, like a general addressing his troops. "This man," he said, pointing to Marcus, "is a hero. He's earned the right to be here more than anyone in this room." The words landed like a thunderclap, reverberating through the auditorium. Parents gasped, students whispered, and Jaden on stage sat up straighter, his eyes locked on his father, and the men now standing for him. Ryan didn't stop there. He turned to the crowd, his gaze sweeping over them, demanding their attention. "I served with Marcus Jackson in Fallujah," he said, his voice steady but laced with emotion. 2004, ambush in the middle of the night. Our squad was pinned down, taking heavy fire. 2 of our guys were bleeding out in the open. Marcus didn't hesitate. He ran through a hail of bullets, dragged them to safety, and held off the enemy until help arrived. He saved my life that night, saved all of us. The crowd was spellbound, some wiping tears, others nodding in awe. A father in a suit shook his head, muttering, "Unbelievable." A teenage girl near the front clutched her phone, her video, live streaming to thousands. The other SEALs stood behind Ryan, their faces carved from granite, their silence as powerful as his words. Each man was a testament to Marcus's past, a living reminder of the bonds forged in battle. There was Cole, lean and wiry, whose quick thinking had diffused IEDs, Javier, whose steady aim had covered their retreats, and three others, each with stories of Marcus's courage etched into their memories. They didn't need to speak. Their presence was enough, a wall of solidarity that made the guards look small. The taller guard shifted, his earlier confidence gone. "We're just doing our job," he mumbled, but his voice lacked conviction. Ryan's eyes narrowed. "Your job?" he said, stepping closer. "Your job is to harass a decorated Marine at his son's graduation? Whose orders are you following?" The question hung in the air, unanswered. The shorter guard looked to his partner, then to the floor, his radio silent now. The crowd's mood was shifting, murmurs turning to voices of support. "Let him stay," a woman shouted from the middle rows. "He's a veteran," called another. Students on stage began clapping, a slow, defiant rhythm that spread. Jaden's face lit up, his earlier shame replaced by pride. Marcus, still standing tall, felt a warmth in his chest. He hadn't asked for this, hadn't wanted the spotlight, but these men, his brothers, had turned the tide. He gave Ryan a subtle nod, a silent thank you forged in years of trust. Ryan pressed on, his voice rising. "Marcus Jackson isn't just a Marine. He's a father who's given everything for his country and his son. You think you can throw him out because of some vague orders? You're disrespecting every man and woman who's ever worn the uniform." The crowd erupted in applause, the sound swelling like a wave. Parents stood, clapping, some cheering. A group of Jaden's classmates whistled, their caps bobbing. The guards were visibly shaken, their authority crumbling under the weight of the room's defiance. The principal, seated near the stage, shifted uncomfortably, his face pale as he whispered to an aide. The SEALs didn't move, their stance a clear message. They weren't going anywhere until justice was done. Marcus felt the moment shift, the humiliation of the guards' accusations giving way to something stronger, vindication. He looked at Jaden, whose eyes shone with admiration. This wasn't how Marcus had imagined the day, but it was a lesson for his son. When the world tries to push you down, you stand taller, and sometimes you don't stand alone. The SEALs' intervention had silenced the guards, but it had also given voice to the crowd, to Jaden, to the truth. Ryan turned to Marcus, a faint smile breaking his stern expression. "We've got your back, brother," he said quietly. Marcus nodded, his throat tight. The battle wasn't over, but with these men by his side, he knew they'd win. The auditorium pulsed with raw energy, the crowd's applause fading into a charged silence. Marcus Jackson stood tall, his dress blues a beacon of resilience, while the 6 SEALs flanked him like sentinels. The guards, now visibly rattled, seemed to shrink under the weight of the room's scrutiny. The taller one, his buzz cut slick with sweat, clutched his radio as if it could save him. The shorter one avoided eye contact, his earlier bravado replaced by a nervous shuffle. Ryan, the SEAL leader, stood with arms crossed, his piercing gaze demanding answers. "You said orders," he repeated, his voice low but sharp. "Who gave them? And why is a decorated Marine being targeted at his son's graduation?" The crowd leaned in, hungry for the truth, phones still recording, some streaming live to social media. The taller guard opened his mouth, then closed it, glancing at his partner for support. The shorter one finally spoke, his voice unsteady. "We were told there was a disruptive individual, someone matching his description." The words landed like a weak spark in a powder keg. A murmur of disbelief rippled through the crowd. "Matching his description?" a woman in a red dress called out, her tone sharp. "You mean a black man in a uniform?" The accusation hung, heavy, and the guards flinched, unable to respond. Parents exchanged looks, some nodding in agreement, others whispering angrily. A teenage boy in the front row muttered, "That's messed up," loud enough for those nearby to hear. The auditorium was no longer just a venue for a graduation. It was a courtroom, and the guards were on trial. Marcus felt the sting of the guards' words, the implication clear. He'd faced prejudice before, sideways glances in civilian life, subtle slights in training. But this was different. This was personal, a direct attack on his right to celebrate his son's milestone. He glanced at Jaden, who sat on stage, his cap slightly askew, his eyes burning with a mix of pride and fury. Marcus wanted to shield him from this, to keep the day pure. But he knew Jaden was learning a hard lesson about the world. Still, Marcus's focus remained unwavering. "This is about my son," he said, his voice cutting through the murmurs. "Not your orders, not your mistakes." The crowd nodded, some clapping softly, their support a lifeline. Ryan pressed forward, his voice rising. "You expect us to believe this was a coincidence? You targeted a man who served this country with honor because of a vague description?" He turned to the crowd, his gesture encompassing them. "Does that sound right to you?" A chorus of "No!" erupted, voices young and old blending in defiance. A father in a suit stood, pointing at the guards. "You owe him an apology." A group of Jaden's classmates began chanting, "Let him stay, let him stay." The energy was electric, the room alive with solidarity. The guards looked to the stage, where the principal, Mr. Hargrove, sat frozen, his face pale. He whispered urgently to an aide who scurried off, likely to fetch someone higher up. Hargrove finally stood, adjusting his tie as he approached the podium. The crowd quieted, expecting accountability. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, his voice shaky, "this appears to be a misunderstanding. We're committed to ensuring everyone feels welcome. We'll investigate this matter fully." His words were met with groans and scattered boos. A mother shouted, "That's it? A misunderstanding?" The principal raised his hands, pleading for calm. "I assure you we'll get to the bottom of this." But his promises felt hollow. A bureaucratic sidestep that did little to ease the tension. Marcus shook his head, unimpressed. He'd heard similar excuses before. Empty words meant to deflect, not resolve. The SEALs exchanged glances, their expressions skeptical. Ryan muttered to Marcus, "They're dodging." The crowd's outrage grew, fueled by the principal's weak response and the guard's silence. A woman in the back stood, her voice trembling with emotion. "This isn't just a misunderstanding, it's discrimination. That man's a hero, and you're treating him like a criminal." Applause broke out, louder than before. Students on stage joined in, some standing, their caps bobbing. Jaden's chest swelled, his earlier shame now fully replaced by pride. He caught his father's eye and gave a small, determined nod, as if to say, "We've got this, Dad." Marcus felt a surge of strength. This wasn't the day he'd planned. But it was becoming something bigger, a stand against injustice, a lesson for Jaden, a moment the crowd would never forget. Marcus stepped forward, his voice calm but resolute. "I don't want your investigation," he said, addressing the principal, but speaking to the room. "I want to watch my son graduate. That's why I'm here. Let's keep this about him." The crowd erupted again, their cheers a wave of support. The guards stepped back, their authority gone. The principal nodded weakly, gesturing for the ceremony to resume. The SEALs remained close, their presence a quiet promise of protection. As the tension eased, Marcus looked at Jaden, his heart full. The truth was out, raw and ugly, but it hadn't broken them. If anything, it had forged something stronger, a shared resolve, a community's awakening, and a father's unbreakable love. The auditorium lights dimmed slightly as the graduation ceremony resumed, but the energy in the room remained electric, charged with the weight of what had just unfolded. Marcus Jackson stood near the front, his dress blues crisp, his posture unyielding, a quiet beacon of strength. The 6 Navy SEALs, his brothers in arms, lingered close, their presence a steady reminder of loyalty forged in battle. The crowd, no longer just spectators, buzzed with a mix of awe, anger, and admiration. Parents whispered to each other, their programs forgotten, while students on stage sat taller, their eyes darting between Marcus and Jaden. The guards had retreated to the sidelines, their radios silent, their authority stripped away. The principal, Mr. Hargrove, avoided eye contact, fidgeting at the podium as he called the next name. But all eyes were on Marcus and his son, the heart of a moment that had transcended a simple graduation. When the announcer called, "Jaden Marcus Jackson," the auditorium erupted. The applause was thunderous, a wave of sound that shook the rafters. Parents leapt to their feet, clapping and cheering, some whistling, others shouting Jaden's name. Students joined in, their caps bobbing as they stood, a sea of black gowns in solidarity. Marcus's heart swelled, his eyes glistening as he clapped harder than anyone, his calloused hands stinging with the force. Jaden rose from his seat on stage, his movements deliberate, his face glowing with pride. As he crossed the stage to accept his diploma, he paused at the center, turned to face the crowd, and locked eyes with his father. In a gesture that brought the room to a hush, Jaden raised his hand in a crisp salute, his cap tilted slightly, his gaze unwavering. Marcus returned the salute, his chest tight with emotion, the crowd's cheers rising again, louder than before. The moment was more than a graduation, it was a triumph, a defiance of the injustice that had threatened to steal this day. Marcus felt the weight of every deployment, every missed milestone, dissolve in that salute. He'd fought wars overseas, but this standing here for Jaden was his greatest victory. The SEALs clapped too, their deep voices cutting through the noise. Ryan, the group's leader, leaned toward Marcus, a grin breaking his stern facade. "That's your boy, brother," he said. Marcus nodded, unable to speak, his throat choked with pride. The crowd remained standing, their ovation stretching on, a testament to the bond between father and son, and to the courage that had silenced the room. After the ceremony, the auditorium spilled into the lobby, where families gathered for photos and congratulations. Marcus and Jaden found each other near the stage, their embrace fierce and wordless. "I'm so proud of you, son," Marcus whispered, his voice thick. Jaden pulled back, his eyes shining. "I'm proud of you, Dad. What you did. Standing up like that." He trailed off, shaking his head, as if words couldn't capture it. The SEALs joined them, their laughter and backslaps filling the space. Ryan recounted old stories, Marcus's quick thinking in Fallujah, his terrible cooking on base, each tale making Jaden's eyes widen. "Your dad's a legend, Cole," one of the SEALs said, ruffling Jaden's cap. Jaden grinned, soaking it in, seeing his father through the eyes of men who'd trusted him with their lives. The incident didn't end in the auditorium. Videos of the confrontation, captured by students and parents, exploded online, racking up millions of views within hours. Hashtags like "Justice for Marcus" and "Marine Hero" trended, with comments pouring in from across the country. "This man's a hero, and they tried to kick him out? Shameful," one user wrote. Another posted, "That salute from his son got me crying." News outlets picked up the story, interviewing witnesses who called the guards' actions blatant discrimination. The school district issued a public apology, admitting the guards had acted on misguided information and suspending them pending a full investigation. The principal's vague promises were replaced by concrete commitments to diversity training and policy reviews, though many felt it was too little, too late. Outside, as families dispersed, the crowd parted for Marcus and Jaden, offering nods, handshakes, and words of respect. A young girl, no older than 10, ran up, holding out a program. "Can you sign this, sir? You're a hero." Marcus smiled, signing it with a flourish, his heart full. Ryan clapped him on the shoulder. "Still leading the charge, brother," he said. The SEALs promised to stay in touch, their bond as strong as ever. As Marcus and Jaden walked to their car, the sunset casting a golden glow, Jaden said, "Today wasn't what I expected, but it's better. Because of you." Marcus squeezed his son's shoulder. "Because of us, Jaden." The day became a story of resilience, a lesson for Jaden, and a wake-up call for the community. Marcus didn't seek the spotlight, but he'd shown his son what it meant to stand tall, to face down prejudice with dignity, and to lean on those who have your back. The viral videos ensured the world saw it too, sparking conversations about race, respect, and the sacrifices of veterans. For Marcus, though, the real triumph was Jaden's smile, the diploma in his hand, and the unbreakable bond they shared. This wasn't just a graduation, it was a legacy, forged in love, loyalty, and the courage to stand up no matter the odds.